Okay, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order this Committee of the Whole meeting of the Council of the Town of Saugeen Shores and welcome everyone to the Council chambers this evening. If the members of the public will indulge us, the members of Council would like to begin the meeting with a moment of silence recognizing the players and victims and family members of the people who were lost their lives in Saskatchewan over the weekend. Thank you all very much. The first item on the agenda is disclosures of pecuniary interest, and I'd ask any member if they have a pecuniary interest with anything on the agenda that they would like to declare. Being none, of course, you can declare one anytime if you need to. Next is additions, deletions, or amendments to the agenda, and we don't have any of those, so that moves us on to delegations. And we have one delegation this evening, and it is from Andrew Barton and Rick Chappell of the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change, and they're here to speak to us about the Unifor wind turbine. So, Andrew, Rick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I'm Andrew Barton here from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, as you said. Thank you for having us today to present the information to you. What I will do, if I can, is go through the presentation that we have here, which I've kept fairly brief. A little bit of background information sort of generally about approvals wind turbines, but then a little bit more specifically about Unifor. And then obviously opportunity then to talk in a bit more detail and answer questions. So just to sort of set the background a little bit with wind facility approvals, there's a distinct change. You've probably heard quite a bit about the Renewable Energy Act that came in September 2009. Before that, wind facility approvals were done through the Environmental Compliance approval process. So in the case of Unifor, it got its initial approval in December 2005 with an amendment in March 2009. So it actually went through that earlier process. After September 2009, the Renewable Energy Act came in with the intent of streamlining the approvals process, combining sort of several things together, and also establishing setbacks, setting down details for acoustic assessment reports and that type of thing. So a little brief overview here of the type of complaints that the Ministry in general and here in the district have received for our wind facilities, not just for Unifor but for Unifor as well. So about 85% of complaints have been in some way related to noise. Generally this has been sort of broadband noise and aerodynamic, that kind of thing, but also some complaints about tonal and infrasound. Shadow flicker as well has been a portion of some complaints. So this is, well, as it suggests, it's the change in shadow when you get a shadow from the blades of the turbine, and obviously they're rotating. The safety lights on the top, on the nacelle of the turbines as well, have been a complaint in facilities, certainly at Unifor and some other places. And then also, often connected with one of those others, particularly the noise, there have been complaints about health. We have a few things written down there. Obviously that's not an exhaustive list, but the sort of fatigue and headaches and that type of thing are pretty typical. So sort of following on from the health effects, I've got a little bit of information here that the Ministry looks at. There's quite a lot of different studies that have gone on, both in Canada and around the world. The Health Canada study is one of the largest that have actually taken place anywhere. So Health Canada undertook a large-scale epidemiological study that consisted of three sort of major components. In-person questionnaire that was administered by Stats Canada to randomly selected participants, and that was people living at various distances from a wind turbine. They also collected quite a large number of objective outcomes. So this would be things like hair cortisol, blood pressure, that type of thing, and also took about 4,000 hours of wind turbine noise measurements. So this was a fairly significant endeavour. The results of which were published starting in 2014. Final results were published in 2016 in a number of peer-reviewed journals. So the results from this didn't suggest any direct health impacts from wind turbines, and that included things like low-frequency noise and infrasound. But what Health Canada did state was that the levels of low-frequency noise and infrasound were found to be below levels that would be expected to result in harm to human health. Another group that is of significant interest, I guess, in Canada at least, is the Council of Canadian Academies. So council assessments are conducted by independent multidisciplinary panels of experts from across Canada and abroad as well, some at times. Assessments strive to identify emerging issues and gaps in knowledge and the Canadian strengths, international trends practices, that kind of thing. So assessments are intended to provide government decision makers, researchers, stakeholders with high quality information required to develop informed and innovative public policy. So their 2015 work that was released called Understanding the Evidence of Wind Turbine Noise, in short, found inadequate evidence of a direct causal relationship between exposure to wind turbine noise and health effects. So, as you'll appreciate, these are fairly technical documents. It's not myself or anyone at the district who is doing the sort of primary review of those for the ministry. What we have is something that's called the Technical Assessment and Standards Development Branch. And this branch has staff that look at, that actively review emerging peer-reviewed scientific information, whether it's on health or acoustics, that type of thing. So as new information comes to light, they will review it to see whether it meets those sort of standards that are required. And if it does meet the standards, they may seek further advice from Health Canada or from the Ministry of Health in Ontario. And obviously then that will be looked at in relationship to the other information that's already there. And this group of people is obviously a resource for us at the district as well. So if people send us information that we think either maybe new or we haven't seen before, then we can certainly send it to the Technical Assessment Standards Development Branch. So just a little overview of compliance activities, and again, this is looking at wind turbines sort of generally. Two types of compliance activities, which is proactive and reactive. Proactive visits are basically any time where we initiate a visit, and reactive is conducted in response to a specific complaint. So visits are conducted a variety of different times, not limited just to business hours, and they're undertaken to obtain field observations, and if it's a reactive one as well, of course, talking to the complainant. So this is what we would call a qualitative assessment. And if the environment officer that goes out and notices a potential impact from the wind turbine, then they will often then do a quantitative assessment, which is basically using a noise meter for a period of time and seeing what sort of levels are obtained. So that brings me to generally quantitative noise assessments. The two different types. The one that I've just talked about is what we would call an attended screening measurement. So it's over a period of time, but with the officer present. If that sort of process suggests that there may be an issue, or that the level is sort of at the point where that could be an issue, then we can move on to unattended noise monitoring, and that is where we will set up equipment, including a small weather station, and over a period of several days, and that will give us better data to go on. The results of that monitoring then would be used to inform whether a more comprehensive assessment is required. And if we feel that it is, a comprehensive assessment then would be conducted according to the methodology in the compliance protocol for wind turbine noise. So you'll perhaps hear about these as I or E audits. So that's probably the end of the sort of general stuff. We were asked, in terms of the delegation, to look a little bit at the classification of areas. So I'll just cover that briefly here. So the turbine receptor locations are defined or divided into different areas known as class 1, class 2, class 3. These classifications have actually been in place for a number of years, actually really since the late 70s, without much change, because the classifications are used for industrial noise, stationary noise sources, and that type of thing, as well as wind farms. So they actually predate wind turbines. So a class 1 area is an area with an acoustic environment typical of a major population centre, where the background centre is dominated by the activities of people, usually road traffic, or known as urban hum. So that is, I guess, really basically, if you thinking of the noise background in Toronto, then that's kind of what you're imagining. Perhaps of more interest for us, because we don't have any class 1 areas. Class 2 area is an area with an acoustic environment that has quantities representative of both class 1 and class 3. So, in other words, dominated, during the day, traffic noise, sounds of people, maybe some light industry, that type of thing, but suburban and much quieter, and also, therefore, elements of the natural environment as well. Class 3 area is a rural area, so it's acoustic environment that's dominated by natural sounds, having little or no traffic, such as small communities with less than 1,000 people, agricultural areas, rural recreational areas, and wilderness. So that's the sort of definition given of those three different areas. And as I say, although that definition has been repeated in newer documentation, it's actually the same as the predating ones that go back to the late 70s. So moving on to Unifor specifically, as many people might know, project consists of what was originally an 800 kilowatt turbine that's been derated to 500 kilowatts. A certificate of approval was obtained in December 2005 with an amendment in 2009, and it commenced operations March 25th, 2013. Although not specifically required as part of the certificate of approval, remembering that this predated RIA, Unifor did commit to undertaking noise auditing to ensure that the noise limits of the turbine don't exceed the standards. So the qualified consultants started in fall of 2013 and spring 2014, but that project was never completed. Unifor undertook preliminary noise monitoring in the spring of 2016, but sort of under the understanding that actually we were waiting for a new compliance protocol to come out. That compliance protocol came out almost a year ago now, April 28th, 2017, and the updates of that compliance protocol were designed to really facilitate easier data collection, easier monitoring for acoustic eye audits. So Unifor undertook the commencement of their acoustic eye audit shortly after that came out. The audits for Unifor, with Unifor being a single turbine, a little bit different from most. So the locations, 3 locations were set up around the single turbine. The locations were based on predicted noise levels. So, in other words, representative of the most impacted locations, but also taking into account sort of distance from trees. Trying to reduce the background noise from trees is something that's important to try and get good quality data. And of course, the locations also had to be accessible and have landover permission. So location 1 was basically north of the turbine, fairly near to Goble Place, but actually in the sports field there. And this is also the location where the weather station was employed. Location 2, southeast of the turbine, agricultural field near Bruce County Road 25. And that one was about 315 metres from the turbine. The other two were just over 200 metres back from it. Location 3, southwest of the turbine, so you've effectively got the sort of three, divided it into thirds around the turbine. Again in a field next to Bruce County Road 25 and about 205 metres back from the turbine. So December 15th, 2017, the acoustic eye audit was submitted. The measurement campaign had not collected sufficient data to meet the compliance protocol for the wind turbine noise. However, there was a reasonable, quite good data from one of the three locations, and based on that data, the information collected indicated that Unit 4 was operating in excess of the applicable sound level criteria. So the Ministry reviewed the eye audit and agreed that it was incomplete, but deemed that there was sufficient evidence there to concur with Uniform's assessment. And so on January 8th, 2018, the Ministry requested that a noise abatement action plan be submitted, and that was submitted to the Ministry on February 16. So, that was requested in 2016 and prepared for Unit 4 and submitted to the Ministry by March 13th of this year. So the Ministry responded to that, noting that the noise attenuation are acceptable at this time. It's a temporary noise abatement action plan while the current set of audits are completed. So the current audit or measurement campaign started at the beginning of March and is expected to complete fairly soon now. Unifor also posted their noise abatement action plan on the website just on April 4th. So the Ministry would expect to receive the complete eye audit by the end of June 2018. And obviously at that point then we can make determinations on the next steps in terms of noise abatement action plans. So that's the end of the little presentation I have. Move into accepting any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin. I suspect there will be questions from members of the committee. We'll start with Councillor Rich.
Thank you to you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So I'm just trying to get this all clear. So it was a voluntary testing that was in non-compliance?
So earlier in the process, going back a few years, there was voluntary testing. Obviously the testing now, as it started last year, was according to the protocol, so that was a full eye audit.
So that there will be mandatory testing in the future, is that what you're saying?
What we would like to get is to the point where we have a complete eye audit and we can make a determination on compliance. I mean, testing is important, but we'd like to move beyond the testing and get to the point where we can determine whether or not it's in compliance.
Right, but you did say that one of your test stations was out of compliance. Is that's correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
Right, so that's through voluntary testing, right? So would you think that down the road you might want to have mandatory testing if you're finding it out of compliance with voluntary testing?
So I don't think, I think I'm right in saying, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's voluntary testing at this point. I mean, they have been required to test in accordance with the eye audit. You're correct in saying that the information so far is incomplete, and that's why they're continuing to test at the moment.
So if they're out of compliance, we'll have mandatory testing in the future? That's all I want to know, is whether or not there will be mandatory testing in the future.
Yeah, so just to recap, so there was no specific requirement in the C of A to do mandatory testing. So they had committed to do it, and the ministry expected them to do it as per their commitment. So that is what they are undertaking now, is the testing, and that will result in the eye audit. So that will determine, based upon that, we will determine compliance. So at this point in time, they are undertaking, mandatory or voluntary, they're undertaking audit to determine if they're in compliance or not in compliance.
Right. Okay. And just one further question, if I may. So you're expecting to get results back from the audit in June 2018? That's what, is that what,
yes.
what I understood? So will the turbine be operating out of compliance from now until then?
So right now there's a noise abatement action plan. So with that noise abatement action plan, so the preliminary numbers that they have suggest they're out of compliance by a certain decibel level. The noise abatement action plan actually derates the turbine. So by the turbine being derated, that actually will reduce the noise output of the turbine. So the current noise abatement action plan, the assumption is that by reducing by derating the turbine, they actually will fall within compliance, the required compliance. So right now, again, based upon the audit they will submit at the end of June, but the expectation is because they've derated the turbine, they're operating within compliance. What will determine that is the eye audit that we should get at the end of June, but again, assuming that everything's correct, they should be operating within, based upon the plan they have in place.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Grace, pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My question is about the 2015 study that you cited by the Council of Canadian Academies, where the conclusion said that there is not sufficient evidence to determine a direct link between wind turbine noise and a negative health effect. But there is sufficient evidence of a causal relationship between exposure to wind turbine noise and annoyance. So my question is there any further information in that study about the relationship between annoyance, prolonged annoyance, and stress? Because to me, that would be sort of a common sense relationship, that if you're constantly annoyed, that would end up being negatively stressful to someone and in fact produce a negative health effect.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so my understanding is that both the Health Canada study and therefore partly what the Academy was looking at, and I think some of the studies as well have looked at that relationship. And it's, community noise is always a difficult one because people don't respond on a sort of linear basis, but the limits that are in place are there they're intended to protect against sort of high levels of annoyance. So I think that was taken into account into those studies. So in other words, with the result of what they're saying about the health impacts include that effect.
Follow up. So essentially what they classified as annoyance was really discounted as not having further negative health effects.
So, and again, obviously this is getting into a lot of detail, but my understanding is this is why the Health Canada study was looking at things like hair cortisol and things, because they're the sort of objective measurements of stress. So I think that this was what they looked into, and therefore their conclusions included that element of it.
Thank you.
Further questions? Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I need to wander a little bit here because of the journey that we've been on, and in knowing that at some point somebody said that people living close to wind turbines shouldn't be living as close as they are today, and so they changed the regulation. We changed the regulation and we've moved the wind turbines further away from people, with even suggestions that we should move them further away again. There's a long study where where some other countries are talking several kilometers away from human habitation before you erect a wind turbine. So we've narrowed it down to 550 meters is the closest that somebody should be living close to a wind turbine. That's a fact, right?
Yeah, so under the Renewable Energy Act, that's the minimum setback. Yeah.
And yet we have people who are living closer to the Unifor turbine than the 550 meters.
Right, so that's true. When Unifor was given approval, it went through the approval process of the day and was compliant with that process. The other thing it has to be compliant with is the acoustic limits. So whilst the setback is less far, it still has to meet the same noise limits at the residence location.
So there are potential health hazards from bits flying around, like recently a wind turbine collapsed in the Chatham area. That's true too, right?
The collapse of a turbine?
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Right. So there's health hazards from pieces of shrapnel that could be flying around, but then any other health hazard, we've sort of bunched it in and called it. We have an annoyance meter now. It's how much annoyed you are, as to whether or not we should be at 550 or a kilometer or something else. So I guess what I'd like to know is, and I think that I'll say a few things here. You're regulators, right? You're bureaucratic regulators, the two of you, and we're small p politicians here. But the government of Ontario uses Health Canada's information to their advantage to try and quieten the noise. That's a pun. Of the people who are mostly affected by this turbine, and yet we're quick to write it off as just it's no longer a direct health impact. And yet we had chief medical officers saying it was, the World Health Organization saying it is, and we keep spinning around what's really going on there. So what about the people, though? Like the people that live there, they're in the area, they're saying that they are sick, they're unwell, and who has come in to say, well, we'll study those people in this microcosm and the macrocosm. We'll actually work with those people beside this turbine. We've put these arbitrary stakes in the ground and says we're going to measure the noise here, we're going to measure the noise there. We're doing all this noise measurement, but are we going into the homes with medical people and saying let's find out more about that's our job. We're here to look after people, and if you're a regulator, it says you're to protect the public interest, integrity in pursuit of compliance, and protect the public interest. So I get that the Unifor wind turbine, is it public or is it private? And is the public interest all the people that live in the community here? I really think it is. So what I would like to know is, if we're using this term grandfather clause. So if you can give me just a few more minutes, I'll wrap this up. Thank you. Along the road of life, we said that gasoline tanks and gas stations were no longer safe. They posed a health hazard. So we wanted to change that. And nobody got grandfathered. There was no grandfather clause. It was a health hazard, and so you had to change the gas tanks. And there was actually help given to change the gas tanks. So there's plenty of evidence to support that when there's a health hazard, and I get that we're no longer calling this a health hazard, but if we change the government, and the government in the future says, we believe there really is a health hazard associated with wind turbines, that would change the game plan too, wouldn't it? They would come back to you and they would say, it now is a health hazard. But my concern is that we keep working with this term, well, they were compliant then, but they're not compliant today. It's not compliant to build within 550 meters, but it was then. So at some point, I would ask two things. One is that we're really sure somehow you could pass that back through your chain of influence and say, at some point in the future, if we change the narrative on this, if we actually find out, because we actually study the people in the community of Saugeen Shores, who are the only people, to my knowledge, who are underneath the wind turbine, so to speak, in how close they are to its effects. If we study them properly, and we change the narrative, and we do find out that it's a health hazard, that we will shut it down. We will stop it, because it's not going to have a grandfather clause. It can't. If it's a health hazard and you're doing your job, it should not be allowed to continue to operate. That's what I'm asking. That's my question. Will you take that back through your chain of influence?
So just a couple of things for clarification. You talk about shrapnel falling from a turbine. I'm not aware of any circumstance where shrapnel has fallen from a turbine and impacted anyone, so just for clarification on that one. Secondly, we didn't say that anything was grandfathered. As Andy had said, the noise limit is still there. Whether it's 550 meters or less than 550 meters, they still have to meet the noise guidelines. So there is no grandfathering of any noise guidelines. They do not have to meet the 550 meter setback. They still have to meet the noise guidelines. So that is not different, whether it's pre or post renewable energy approval. So just wanted that clarification. And from a health perspective, I mean, we've quoted a couple of studies here. I know Huron County Health Unit is undertaking a health study as well. If people have specific information that they want us to bring forward within the ministry related to health, we're more than happy to take that forward and share it with our standards development branch to take a look at that information.
I'd like to thank you for the clarification, and I would like to thank you if you think that there's value, and I think there is, that we ask our citizens to join a focused health study. If they haven't done one already, I'd like to see them do it now. And I'd like your support in pushing that forward.
Right, and so that request would be made through the Grey Goose Health Unit. It would be where that request would be made through. So my recommendation, if your citizens are interested in participating with a health study, the connection would be through the Grey Goose Health Unit, as they're the lead from Human Health, and bring that forward to the Chief Medical Officer of Health.
Further questions? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and through you. I too have a couple of comments, and then we'll get to a question. When I read the deposition, and then when I heard you fellows speak out here about it, I was a little bit taken aback that we're still talking about whether or not industrial wind turbine noise is harmful to the health. I just, after all these years and the data that's been collected, obviously not the data that was hypothesized by Health Canada and by the Academy that you quote, and obviously they've hypothesized that through their collection of data that noise is not harmful to health. But I too would hypothesize that none of the people that conducted those studies live underneath of or within 550 meters of wind turbines. But it's just a guess. But I'm going to hypothesize that way as well. And further on, you say that there has been several attempts at noise testing conducted by Unifor on their own wind turbine, and some of them have come back inconclusive. Some of them have come back with some limited conclusivity that there is an exceedance of the noise turbines, and based on that, you've required them to conduct further self-testing on their wind turbine to find out if, in fact, these exceedances was an anomaly or whether it's going on and on. And it occurs to me that's kind of like the police officer asking the drunk driver to go away for a year and take a breath sample when the conditions you find are just right, and let us know if you're exceeding your alcohol blood limits in your system, and come back and please self-report on your findings. And especially after the drunk has come back already several times and said, I wasn't sure, so I'm going to do it at a different time of year, or I'm going to do it when I'm early in the morning, when I haven't been drinking yet, or what. It seems odd that that's the course you would take, that you wouldn't follow a course of action similar to what Councillor Minaj has suggested of proactively going and doing a hard compliance audit independent of the licensee. But my question is then, finally, through all the testing that's been done in all of Ontario, and I'll keep it just to Ontario, has the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change ever found a wind turbine that is exceeding the noise limits to the point where they've ordered it to be shut down? Or have they all continued their operation to this point, which is what I suspect? Thank you.
Yeah, so wind turbine facilities have to operate within the terms and conditions of either their certificate of approval or their renewable energy approval. If they are operating over those noise limits, the only solution isn't shutting down the turbine. There's other solutions which which may include derating the turbine. So if you're able to derate the turbine, and if that then drops the noise down to where you meet the limits of the turbine, that's an option for them. So it's not shut the turbine off. It is, they would propose mitigation to actually come into compliance with the noise limits, and then we would review that mitigation to determine if that actually would bring them into compliance with the noise limits. We ask them to do further testing to confirm that that mitigation, in fact, does bring them in compliance with the noise limits. In this case, as Andy had mentioned, the preliminary numbers from Unifor have suggested they're over compliant. They're out of compliance with the noise limits, and that's why the noise abatement action plan was put into place. We currently are asking them to collect additional data to try to meet the protocol, the compliance protocol, and to determine, so they're also collecting data to ensure that the mitigation measures they put in place actually will bring them into compliance with the noise guidelines.
But in the meantime, the turbine continues to operate, which is...
It continues to operate with mitigation in place.
Well, it's derated to the 500 megawatts, or 5
Derated
kilowatts,
to 300,
right?
300.
That's 300, so it's...
Yes.
I also, and I don't have direct evidence to back it up, but I also understand that they do take deratings and shut down their wind turbine from time to time when the wind direction is such that it maybe affects their own facility, but that's just evidence that's been suggested. So, thank you.
Okay, further questions? We have Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. And thank you for your presentation. I know Mr. Chappell and Mr. Barton, you've never shied away from attending council meetings. You've been to Kincardine, I know, and I listened to your presentation there, and I know you've been to West Grey, or in the process of going to West Grey, so you never shy away, so I appreciate that. And I just wanted to say that, yeah, I mean, these are just a few. My ink cartridges are running out at home, but I was elected in Saugeen Township Ward, and I received a bundle of emails over the last several years, and part of that, these 600 complaints, 500 to 600 complaints, I think, have been sent in regarding the wind turbine, and I know you've heard these comments before. You mentioned them tonight, and the nausea and the headaches, and the dizziness and the vertigo, and some referred to as annoyances, and I heard you at your presentation in Kincardine, we talked about annoyances, and again here tonight, and some refer to as symptoms as infrasound exposure, and I just was reading some information on the World Health Organization recent report on night noise and environmental noise is emerging as one of the major public health concerns of the 21st century, and the study demonstrated a strongly significant association between reported sleep disturbance and ill health in those residing close to a wind turbine. And, you know, unless we walked in those people's shoes down in the air of the wind turbine, how do we really know? And what effects they're having on those people's lives? And I guess I have a question, Mr. Chappell, and I guess it is, do you think the residents in the area of Unifor Windmill are being discriminated against? And the reason I ask you that question, the town did oppose this application back in 2003-04, I think it was, and went to the OMB, of course. We lost the battle, hence the resulted in the wind turbine being constructed. But, you know, that was a 200-meter setback. I'm not telling you anything you don't know here. But that was increased to 550 meters. And, and then I researched some information on South Australia, for example. It's now a 1,000-meter setback between residential housing and wind power. And yet, the MOE allows Unifor wind turbine to keep operating and essentially grandfathering harm to our residents. I know your hands are tied to a point. I get that. perhaps with if there's a government change, maybe things will change with the turbine. But I guess I ask you the question, Mr. Chappell. Do you think the residents of in the area of the Unifor wind turbine are being discriminated against? And again, it's the 200 meter, it's the 550 meter. That wind turbine would not have been allowed to be constructed today with the new setback, and they're increasing around the world, the setbacks. That was my first question. I don't know whether you want to answer that question or not, but I think
sure.
I think people down there are being treated very unfairly, and I think that the sooner that the province of Ontario admit to make a mistake, the better. That's my first question. Could you also talk, just to store that one, but could you also talk about decibel levels? I'd like to explain what an acceptable decibel level is without triggering a penalty. On the MOE website and in the windmill regulations, they talk about imposed to those who are exceeding acceptable levels. Are there penalties, fines, so to speak? And talk about that. What is the amount of that penalty? And have you had to impose any penalties for exceeding of acceptable decibel levels? And of course, I'm speaking about the Unifor wind turbine. So those are the two questions I have about the 200, 550 meter and decibel levels. If you could, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So with regards to the 200 versus 550, as mentioned previous, the noise guidelines are still the noise guidelines, and they still have to meet those noise guidelines. I mean, we presented the ministry position on health, and clearly that's debatable. People have different opinions with regards to health. So it's hard for me to kind of get into that kind of discussion with you. The ministry based our position from a health perspective on the studies we have suggested. There may be other studies that suggest something different, and again, we're more than happy to take those forward to our technical standards branch to review for those. But again, the health debate is always out there, and there are people on both sides of that opinion, whether it's health impact or not health impact. Your second question about decibels. So the current limit is 40 decibels. So if a company is not meeting that, is required in the renewable energy approval, what the ministry would do is say that you have to put in mitigation measures to come into compliance. So that mitigation could be anything from shutting a turbine off to derating a turbine. People a lot smarter than me, noise engineers would suggest if you derate a turbine from 500 to 300 kilowatts, that's probably about a 3 decibel reduction in noise that you would have from the turbine. So the numbers that we received from the Unifor turbine preliminary results would suggest by derating from the 500 to 300, we'll drop it by 3 decibels, and therefore they will be in compliance with the ministry noise guidelines. Again, we're asking them to continue to monitor just to confirm that in fact is the case. I'm sure that fully answers your question, or?
So have you had to, in your time with wind turbine, had to have imposed penalties, or ever close to imposing penalties for not meeting those levels?
So a couple of things. Pre-RIA, there is no requirement for companies to actually undertake acoustic audits. So if the ministry determines there is a potential for a compliance issue, we can require them to undertake acoustic audits, which we have done for the Unifor wind turbine and which we have done for the Enbridge wind turbine as well. I know the Enbridge turbine is not within your municipality, but they have submitted to us, and the ministry is currently have those under review. For renewable energy approvals, there is a requirement right within the approval for them to submit I-audits to the ministry for review. So the ministry has received, I don't know the number off the top of my head for the number of I-audits the ministry has received, but the ministry, 270. So the ministry has reviewed some of those and determined some, and again, I don't have specific numbers across the province, but have determined some of those wind facilities are in compliance. Other ones, they haven't finished a complete review of those yet.
Further questions? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and through you. I didn't really understand what you meant when you just said something, but it played into something that Councillor Mayette had sort of started a little thread. we seem to be just accepting of information that comes from Unifor. And I guess I'm curious to know, they put a turbine up that was bigger than what we had described to us during public meetings here in Saugeen Shores at the time, and in fact what was approved. So a bigger turbine went up, then it got derated. And now a solution to some issues based on data that they provided, which was incomplete, it's been derated again. And now you just said something along the lines of, them monitoring activity over this next little while. I'm really curious to know, and I'm perhaps a little bit naive about how in fact it all works in terms of the derating, but why is the ministry not a little more proactive in terms of going in there and doing inspections and whatever? I'm curious to know, how do you monitor that they're actually doing what the abatement policy that's been put in place is requiring of them to do? Because I don't think we're at the point where you should be sitting back and waiting for complaints. I think you should put them on a regular schedule so that you show up at different times and you get different viewpoints perhaps than what you're getting from the information that they provide. How proactive are you in monitoring the abatement policy that's been put in place? And perhaps you could just explain to me, now they've got a turbine that's got an 800 rating on it that went down to 500 so that they complied initially, but now it's down to 300. How low does that have to go before we recognize that it's just a bad turbine in the wrong location? Because it's almost 2/3 below what the capacity is of it, and it's up there in the sky. But really my point was, are you committed to be a little more proactive at monitoring what's going on right now to make sure that data is being collected that you need, and that it's being collected properly, and second of all, that whatever abatement is supposed to be happening at certain times, to reach this 300 level, that it actually is occurring. I'm not too sure how the equipment would monitor that itself, but I would appreciate knowing that the ministry was at least trying to have our back on this and helping us encourage, Unifor to do what they need to do and what they've said they're going to do. So how proactive are you, and are you committed to being proactive in the next little while to make sure that abatement is met?
Right, so just for clarification purpose, when we ask a company to undertake an acoustic audit, it's a third-party independent consultant that actually has to undertake that. So when we say independent, that is an acoustic company that was not involved in the original application as part of the wind turbine application. So that is across the board, that it is a third-party independent consultant that undertakes that. So with regards to knowing that the turbine has been derated, we can and have received information from Unifor with regards to the turbine output to confirm that the turbine is in fact being derated to 300 kilowatts during the time period in which they said that it is being derated. The other point just to address is there is specific requirements within the ministry's 2017 compliance protocol that a company has to meet. So when we ask the company to undertake an eye audit, they can't just pick and choose the type of information they're going to submit to the ministry. They have to submit to the ministry in accordance with our compliance protocol, and once that is deemed to be complete, they have submitted sufficient information to complete the compliance protocol, or to meet the requirements of the compliance protocol, is when we deem if they're in compliant or not in compliant. So there is a detailed protocol that they have to information that they
Thank you. However, really what I was interested in was, in your presentation to us, you talked, one of the lines here with compliance activities was, the very first line says, proactive visits are initiated by the ministry. I'm really curious to know, how often do you initiate visits, and are you prepared and committed to do that? Because there seems to be an issue. Something's been put in place. Which, there's an end time frame here, the end of June, where some other reports, like how often do you visit and do these proactive visits, and are you planning to do any in the very near future?
Right, so it's a process. So our first step in our compliance protocol would be go to make observations, to talk to individuals, and to do a handheld measurements. All those handheld measurements do is indicate to the ministry if there's a potential issue or not. The next step in that process would be to do an unattended, where we would leave a machine at a person's residence for a week and collect additional data. And then the third and final step would be the eye audit or the acoustic audit, and that's what they're undertaking now. So to go back out with a handheld does not provide any additional information, because we're already at the final step of the compliance protocol, and that's requiring Unifor to undertake an eye audit. So like a handheld, going out with a handheld will not provide any additional information to us. I mean, if we go with a handheld and the noise is over the limit, or what we would do is say complete an eye audit, and that's what they're doing now.
So what I'm hearing you say is that there's really no point for you to show up in Saugeen Shores. You're just going to wait for a report.
What you're hearing is they currently have a noise abatement plan in place that they feel is addressing the non-compliance with the noise issues. They are currently collecting data to confirm that noise abatement plan, in fact, is working as they suspect it to be.
I guess what
in the process of collecting additional data to try to fill the requirements of the compliance protocol.
I guess what our community would like to know, though, is that as some of these abatement measures are being undertaken, that you might actually sometimes be standing somewhere near the turbine when it's doing what it's supposed to do during the process, so that you're actually physically here seeing and hearing what actually is happening. And I guess, I'm just a little disappointed that, we don't seem to get a commitment to have a little more interest shown in us, because there seems to be a little bit of activity right now, which is a good thing. Thank you.
Just to add a little bit to that, we do get what we call the SCADA or SCADA data from the turbine, which is the sort of real-time monitoring of it, and that shows when it's derated down to 300. So that is something we have access to that information and communicate with Unifor about that.
Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Follow up on the health question. Were any individuals from Saugeen Shores included in the random studies that were completed by the two studies that you mentioned?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, then going forward, is it possible to have some kind of, as Councillor Minaj suggested, I think some kind of survey done with individuals living here in this area?
Yeah. So as Rick mentioned, the Huron County Health Unit has undertaken to do a survey along the lines of what you're talking about. Now, their survey is limited to a certain distance from turbines in Huron County. I can't remember what that distance is, but it's more local than what would allow your residents to take part in that. So it certainly is possible for a local health unit to undertake that kind of survey if they want to, if they feel that they're going to get useful information from that type of thing. And then obviously the local health units form a part of the Ministry of Health for Ontario, so that would be the most valid way for that information to go through.
One more question from Councillor Mike Myatt, and then I'll have a comment.
This is really quick. Unifor, the acoustic audit, I meant to ask this question earlier, sorry. The 3 locations that were chosen, I don't quite understand how they were chosen in the locations that they were put. There must be some significance to the locations. Just explain quickly why they picked those 3 spots.
Yeah, so a combination of things. I mean, in essence, the locations are as close or fractionally closer than the sort of the nearest houses. So that's one part of it. The locations sort of represent 3 different areas around the turbine to try and get different wind directions, and also somewhat represent the areas where there's perhaps more complaints coming from. There's more residences. They also represent, when they do the modelling for the turbine, they do a sort of almost like contour lines of what they expect to get from the noise. Now that's model data, but that also helps to indicate where it's going to be the sort of higher levels. So the other thing probably worth mentioning as well, obviously you can move the station a few meters one way or the other, and you might get a fraction of 1 decibel. But what we're looking here for is compliance, and we need to know whether it's compliant. And as Rick mentioned earlier, if something is in the region of 2 decibels over, then that's going to be measured at that point.
We've had lots of good discussion around the table, and I wanted to make a comment first. Again, I wanted to thank the two of you for coming in this evening. I know, Rick, you have always made yourself available whenever we've asked to speak with you. You've always come and been willing to do that, and I appreciate that. And I know the municipality has. But of course, it'll come as no surprise to you that I, for one, am. Well, the Vice Deputy Mayor made the comment that she was a little disappointed. That was polite of her, and I'm very disappointed with the ministry's actions with regard to this whole thing. I don't think you're going to need to be all that proactive when it comes to responding or monitoring this turbine because you're going to get complaints. I don't think it's hard to predict you're going to keep getting complaints because people are too close to the turbine and it's noisy. It's interesting, the site where you were able to get results, the only site where you were able to get results, or where Unifor was able to get results as part of this test, according to Martin Itchie's work that he did in predicting what the noise levels would be in these areas, wasn't the loudest spot you were testing. In fact, site number 3 was. Site number 3, Itchie predicted would be louder than the site where you were able to get data, the only site you were able to get data. So it's a little concerning to me that we only have data for a site that's quieter than what the guy who predicted wrong predicted. So, so that's concerning. But of course, the biggest problem with this whole thing is time, right? I mean, you've said, Andrew, you said it has to be compliant with acoustic limits. No, the noise limit is still there. But you could have fooled me. Where is it? It's been 5 years. Where have you guys been? Right? It's been 5 years from just about right now, Easter time. 5 years. I mean, the speed limits are there. But if I go speeding down the road and the cop doesn't show up for 5 years, they don't do us a whole lot of good, do they? So we got these laws. I'm not sure what good they are. No one's enforcing them. But they're there. They're there. And you guys are supposed to enforce them. So here you are. And I'm glad you're here. What happens when the complaints continue? What happens after you get your results and the turbine is compliant? What happens when the complaints continue? Will it be 5 more years before we get another audit? Your responses to Councillor Rich were confusing, because every time I've ever spoken to you, Rick, about this, every time I've ever asked you a question, will you mandate the audit? You've said it's a voluntary audit. The audits are voluntary. Right up until, I've never heard, this is the first I've heard about mandatory testing. There hasn't been any as far as I was aware. It's good to hear that they're mandatory now, but I haven't heard that from you, Rick, or from anybody else. So when the complaints continue, and they will continue, when they continue, will you mandate that the machine be audited, and will you show up and enforce the law? Because that's why we hire you. And we rely on you to do that. Will you enforce the law?
In response, it's hard to answer hypothetical questions. If the noise abatement plan is in place and they are within the noise limits, complaints may certainly stop. Complaints, currently part of what we've asked Unifor to do is not only to conduct the eye audit as they're doing now, but we've also asked them to look at the complaints and do analysis of those complaints. The majority of complaints we are receiving since they derated the turbine, I would probably suggest at least 90% of them are during the day. and that's when the majority of complaints are receiving. Right now, at this point in time, they're not derating the turbine during the day. That would probably lead someone to believe that maybe they should be derating the turbine during the day, but that will be part of the complaint analysis plus the additional data they collect. And the noise abatement plan that we have in place is a document that the ministry can require to be amended at any point in time. If we determine that, you know what, they need to do additional noise mitigation measures in place, we can require them to do that. So as I say, part of our ongoing review of this is what current complaints we're receiving. Do those complaints fall within the mitigation measures or not within the mitigation measures? And if they don't fall within the mitigation measures, then perhaps that's something that they need to look at to see if there is mitigation measures that are required for when they are receiving those complaints.
Thanks for that. Of course, the ministry has shown a stunning lack of willingness to require anything with regard to this turbine. I mean, you say that the ministry could have required 4 years ago, after receiving only 100 complaints, that an audit be done. It could have required an audit after 300 complaints 2 years ago. It could have required one be completed, I don't know, 2 years ago when it was first promised, or I guess that may have been 3 years ago, or 6 months after that, or 2 months after that. You can sense that I don't have a lot of confidence that you're going to require things be done. Will you actually require these things be done? Will you mandate they be done?
Right, so a requirement is for them to operate within the terms and conditions of their certificate of approval. So that's what, if they're operating within the terms and conditions of their certificate of approval, they're in compliance. We can't ask for more than compliance. Mm-hmm. So if the audit shows and the complaint analysis shows that they're not operating within the terms and conditions of certificate of approval, yes, they will be required to put mitigation in place to bring themselves into compliance with those terms and conditions.
Okay, thanks very much, guys. We appreciate you coming in and subjecting yourselves to us. And but we'll let you go now and have a good evening.
Yeah, and certainly, Luke, we'll be more than happy when we do get that final report submitted at the end of June. If you want us to come back to council or want to meet with yourself or the mayor, we'd be more than happy to talk about the results of that. The expectation is as well that final report will be posted on the Unifor website, but certainly we'd be happy to come back to update council after that.
Very much appreciate that offer. Thank you. So thank you to the rest of you for bearing with us. We'll move on in the agenda now to reports of municipal officers and committees, and if we have reports under general government, and the first report is a staff report, Business to Bruce Toolkits, presentation by Tenzing, and I think Jessica Linthorne has the report. Jessica.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. We are moving along with the Business to Bruce initiative. So it's an initiative that we're working in partnership with the county to attract new businesses and entrepreneurs to Saugeen Shores. So with the staff report, I'm requesting a couple of things. Requesting approval of the themes as presented by Tenzing and Bruce County, so they'll be joining us in one moment. And then also I'm requesting council to receive the toolkits as presented by Tenzing. So with that, I'm going to introduce Gary from Tenzing, and Jill and Susan are here as well from the Economic Development Team at Bruce County.
Oh, yeah. Hi, good evening, thanks. Hopefully this goes a little quicker for you, and questions welcome at the end as usual. Before we get into this, just really quickly, economic development, I want to kind of make one thing clear about it. It's changed a lot over the last generation. There's a study done out of the States that I can share through my clients at Bruce, if you like, where they talk about this really important fact that it used to be a long time ago that people followed jobs. And if you created jobs, people would come. And I think that's proven with Bruce Power, right? That people come when the jobs are here. But what's changing in economic development now is that jobs actually follow people. And you create an environment of people, an engaged business community, and what follows is economic vitality. And our job at Tenzing and Bruce County's job, I think, for its municipalities is to create the conditions that attract people who will attract business and create business. And that's something that happened, many, many, many years ago. And in most small rural communities, it didn't re-happen. It didn't restart. So you end up with a lot of communities in Ontario and across Canada and the States that are having trouble renewing themselves economically. I would say you're blessed here for many reasons, but you're also blessed with a great opportunity to take advantage of time that you're going to have on your side for a little while. So as we go through this, if you can keep those things in mind, I think it makes what we're saying relevant and more important than it might be. Okay, so am I clicking this? I guess I am. You didn't give me a lesson on this, Jessica. I just keep moving. Oh, I do. So we'll do a little bit of Business to Bruce. That's a program run by the county. We'll do a quick review of the audit. This is many, many months of work. You're going to get it in about 14 minutes. Positioning overview, positioning and marketing is a specific thing. I'll try to explain that quickly. And then both the Southampton strategy and support tools in Port Elgin. And to get to that point, we also had to look at Saugeen Shores, because those two communities are part of this municipality. So we've found a way to connect the dots, and we hope it works for you. So Business to Bruce 2014 developed a countywide community development program. Oh, thank you very much. Am I sounding raspy? In this business recruitment, it was basically to attract people. We created this website. We call it eHarmony for Entrepreneurs. And if you get a chance, go take a look at it. And what it does is it matches people that we're going to attract through a program run by the county from with a wide net to bring interest and attract interest in Bruce County. And when they get to that site, they can go on and find the community best suited to the type of business or business community they want to be a part of. And that's the cornerstone of the program. And the focus is always on who, not what. Because we won't attract big smokestacks. You never did anyway. And you don't necessarily want them, but we will attract people who are creative and who want to start businesses. And we will attract people who are younger, because all rural communities need that younger population base too. Okay, so the audit overview is we looked at Saugeen Shores, provided documents, we researched business population, and we met with your local business owners. We had a good discussion. We had several good discussions, and it was really, it's always interesting, it's always different. And owning a business, I love meeting the stakeholders in your communities, because they work really hard. And they have challenges, but boy, they see opportunities too. They're great. What we learned about Southampton is that a focus on the arts and creativity and culture sectors has the most appeal for the majority of stakeholder session participants. That doesn't mean you have to be an arts business to do well if the cultural and arts business community of Southampton grows. All ships rise when your economy is going well. Niche retail will follow focus on creativity. And the olive oil store is a good example of that. He was in the meeting. He was such a brilliant guy. He's got lineups out the door. And there's a reason for that. If I'm selling what Walmart is selling, I'm losing as a retailer. Okay? If I'm doing niche retail and building unique businesses, not only am I more successful, but I have an opportunity to sell outside of my market, which is very, very good. So that's what we're looking for on the retail side. And then finally, Southampton, oh wait, I think I went the wrong way, didn't I? That was just quick. Special attention should be paid to expanding the arts and culture economy beyond the summer tourist season. Okay, so that we get more tourists and more people up here all season long, more businesses a little more vital all season long, including accommodations. What we learned about Port Elgin is the economic momentum in the region needs to be capitalized on so that future economic prosperity can be enjoyed, independent of Bruce Power. Okay, so we know there's a great initiative in Port Elgin and the Saugeen Shores around Bruce Power, and that's terrific, and that's something that has to be done. But while that's happening, let's start diversifying. And a diversified economy is always a stronger economy. We also know Bruce Power is a double-edged sword, that it drives up wages for folks who are trying to hire service staff. It drives up wages and makes it very competitive for talent in this community. So we need to diversify. If we can do that, you'll be more successful as a community. The community has a high concentration of engineers. Richard Florida called these creative class. I just think they're innovative people. And you brought a few engineers together, I hope there are none in the room, and you get more. It's really quite an exciting thing. It's called clustering. And if you get people and give them opportunities to think and be unique and be different and create the conditions in which they can do that, you will create more businesses and you will attract people who start them. So that's why we're looking at that group. Positioning, sorry about the non-AODA compliant color there, but in marketing, positioning your product is the oldest strategy in marketing, is that you have to have a position that is both unique and different. So most communities don't really do that. They all have signs at the front of as you come into town that say open for business. There are 400 communities in Ontario that have that sign, open for business. The opposite of that would be closed for business, which I don't think is a good one. In marketing, you want to position as unique. So what we did was we looked at Saugeen, and then we looked at Port Elgin and Southampton, and we said, what is it that makes this community unique, whether it be in arts and culture or technology and innovation? And there is something. It has to motivate action, too. I think that's the most important part. We want people to want to know more. So for Saugeen Shores, we themed it, and that's part of what you're buying today, I think, is to live creatively. You come to this community to live creatively, and you can express that through a technology skill. You can express that through an arts skill. But to live creatively is a really interesting attraction for this community. I think it fits Saugeen Shores really, really well. The neat thing, too, though, is in Southampton, if we focus on culture and arts and we say embrace your creativity and create the conditions for that, they take that side of it. And in Port Elgin, if we energize innovation and create the conditions for innovation, Port Elgin takes that side of it. But it all fits under the same umbrella. We looked at audiences. There are several that are common here, and some of those come out of the Bruce County program. But in this case, there are a couple of differences, too. So Bruce alumni are people that moved away. We know that attracting people back is much easier than going and knocking on the door of everybody who doesn't know you from Adam. So Bruce alumni are always first, and a lot of people have moved away, if you look at the statistics. Friends and family of the people who still live here. A lot of us have kids who moved away and so on, and we want to attract them back and give them an opportunity to reconsider. Because we know that big urban centers are very expensive to live in. And yes, they may have more high-paying jobs, but if we create an environment for work, an environment for creativity, we could attract them back. Local tourists come here because they love it here, and you've probably met local tourists who have always said, gee, I wish I could live here. So let's give them a reason to. Arts and culture businesses are growing all over Ontario, and making this a center, or making Southampton a center or a hub for that is a great idea. You've got a terrific center and a school already. Let's take advantage of what we have. And I used to work at Mitel Corporation in Ottawa. 4,000 engineers can never be wrong. So you've got them, and you've got them in spades. You've got creative, innovative, smart people, and what a terrific resource. You're blessed. Seniorpreneurs, not as old as me. I'm an ancientpreneur. Seniorpreneurs are 50 to 55. They're retiring from their full-time gigs, but they've always had a dream, right? And they've always had a hope to do something, especially in Southampton. I think you're going to find you have an opportunity in that market. And then what we call Bruce Power families, it's really neat. When somebody moves up here from Bruce to work at Bruce Power, they typically will bring a family with them. And that family is equally well educated. That family is equally creative. Let's give them something to do. Let's engage them. So that's the whole purpose of this program. Industry-specific opportunities in Southampton are arts and culture businesses, artisans, tourism. There's an experience-driven style of tourism, which we think is really strong, which should work here. The hospitality accommodation market and strong niche retail. And on the Port Elgin side, value-added retail. By value-added, that means you don't just sell stuff at the front door, you sell it at the back door, wholesale. That is bigger than the front of the store. Energy, consulting, small tech, and engineering are all really good, strong sectors for you to grow in because you've got the people here who can do it. You talked about narratives earlier, changing the narrative. We create narratives. That's what we do for a living. Narratives are the story you tell about your community. So when somebody asks, the story we want to tell about Southampton is that artistic and cultural movements happen when talented individuals discover that while they are passionately unique, they're not alone. And this is the potential of Southampton. on the sandy shores of Lake Huron and Bruce County, where we can empower a community of artists and artisans and creative thinkers to come together and promote and attract them. Okay, Southampton is where artists learn, where culture is our retail focus, when we're an entire community, regardless of age and origin or style, embraces its wonderful creativity. And we think for Southampton that narrative, if expressed properly, captures the essence of that community in an economic development context. Our strategy is to mobilize and engage current artist and artisan community to inventory their current outputs, and I know that sounds a little bit technical for people who are in the arts business, but it's actually really important that we know who's here, to promote what's being produced, all the case studies, all the best practices say it's wonderful to talk about this stuff, but you've actually got to promote it. Become a community that embraces and supports art-based businesses to the point of actually teaching them how to run a business, because they are notoriously not great business people. But the business of art is a strong, strong economic base. So we created a thing that we call the catalog. This is called Scene in Southampton. It's in your toolkit. Scene in Southampton would promote the local artists that are in the community. It would be built by the local artists that are in the community and operated by them perhaps once, maybe twice a year. We know that if we promote and become a center of a place, that a publication like this can help grow the whole business sector. This is the inside of it. You can look at it in more detail as time allows. An e-newsletter. It's an interesting world you live in. All those audiences, all of them, every single person within those audiences, and there'd be thousands or hundreds per, all have personal networks. All of the people who live here have personal social media networks. And an email or an e-newsletter distributed the right way takes advantage of your whole population and allows them to become your media. I think, well, we know that works. We'll give Jessica and her team and the whole community pitch kits and inserts, some of the more traditional economic development tools that when they're at conferences, in meetings, if people come into town, they will have the key statistics. But most important one for me, there'll be 4 interviews or 5 interviews done of local business people about why they do business here. And there'll be a video on the website that's shot in Southampton and in Port Elgin about those 2 communities, featuring the business people who live here. And pull up banners and all kinds of fun things. But our thinking here is to really, really focus on the creativity of that community. And even to the point where retailers will be encouraged to stack magazines, the catalogs in their stores, so that when people come into town, they'll pick them up and go and look for different things. Port Elgin is a different type of community. Imagine a community where innovative thinking, idea design, technology, literacy, and pioneering spirit is the backbone of local commerce and skills development. It may not be 100% there today, but we have to aspire to it, right? Main Street retailers could learn the skills to thrive in a digital shopping area. Retail's not dead. It's not even close to dead. Unique retail is thriving. Okay? It's bad retail that's dying. And have the support of the community as they tried new ideas. That would be a pretty neat place to do business. Computer literacy could be pervasive in all age groups. Great case study of the States, really quick. They taught everybody in town high computer literacy skills. Everyone got free computer training in that community. And their whole economy lifted. And employers came to town because the people in the town were so literate in technology. Imagine a community trying something like that. I think that's just amazing. You can do it. I think you should. Our small businesses in the energy sector and other technical sectors could enjoy better access to the skills they need to grow. Port Elgin on the shores of Lake Huron, we have to keep saying that because that's where you are, has the potential to be that community of the future. But we have to mobilize our creative thinkers now. Okay, and if we do that, I think you do energize. Does everybody know, like, this doesn't happen by next week, right? Like, when they planted grapes in Niagara, it took a few years. This is a long-term thing that for communities to evolve, to become innovative centers, or in other parts of Bruce County to do different things, it takes time, and it takes commitment. So the strategy is expand on the existing engineering and tech talent and build a brand culture around that talent. And form a volunteer group. We've called it the Think Tank. You don't have to, but we think it's kind of fun. Comprised of the community's innovative thinkers, with a focus on new ideas and new innovation, exploration. When you put people together who are bright and curious in a room, great things happen. And promote the outputs of that group in an attraction-focused communications tools. So, there's a thing we came up with that supports the think tank. This would be print ads. What were you thinking in Port Elgin? And this woman talks about the business she started and the success she has found. This next one is create the future of retail. So we gather a meeting together of the think tank and we talk about nothing but retail. Have a guest speaker in to talk about the future of retail. We do radio campaigns while tourist season is on. Well, why would you do that? Because your tourist is one of your key audiences, your tourist group, right? And if we're running ads that say Port Elgin is growing into a hub of innovation and business ideas, and the business leaders of our community, sorry about that, I got ahead of myself. We'll go well beyond our strength in the energy sector. How do I know? Ask the business leaders of our community, what were you thinking, Jane Smith of Smith & Daughters? And Smith & Daughters is that consulting firm. You have a 25-second clip. It's a 1-minute commercial. They run on local radio stations, and tourists actually do listen to radio all the time. So what are you thinking when it comes to starting or expanding a business in Port Elgin? Join the Port Elgin Think Tank to share ideas and boost the pioneering spirit in our economy. Port Elgin is where we're energizing innovation, and visit saugeenshores.ca/portal think tank to learn more. Sponsored by the Port Elgin Think Tank and the municipality of Saugeen Shores. So that's the type of promotion you do. These are digital banner ads. I know none of you see them, but they work. So you must look sometimes. Expanding beyond bricks and mortar retail in Port Elgin. Explore new ideas with your peers and local experts. This month at the Port Elgin Energizing Innovation. What are the local retailers thinking? So those are examples of how the think tank could actually work. And again, for Port Elgin, the team will have those interviews, those videos, that work that promotes the community in a very, very consistent way. That's Business to Bruce for Port Elgin and Southampton in 22 minutes. Questions, please.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions from the committee. We'll start over here with the Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you. I had a couple of questions for clarification and then a comment. And maybe one of the questions is more for Jessica. In the report, there's a reference at one point to something referring to pay attention to the barriers that were expressed in Port Elgin. Did you receive that kind of information? It's not in this report.
Sorry, through you, Deputy Mayor. What was the line specifically?
Well, there's another place in the Southampton one I wrote down. It's on page 71 of our stuff. It talked about, refer to the product readiness chart for Southampton. It was kind of the same reference. Did the town get that information?
Yeah, so we do have copies of this of the full strategy documents.
Because it seemed to gloss over, some of the negative stuff with this. So I just wanted to make sure that it was somehow part of the conversation here. Yeah. I wanted to ask you. You use the expression youth housing. We talk about affordable housing here. We talk about all kinds of different housing designs. How do you define youth housing?
Housing that new or incoming families, young families and individuals can afford and would want to actually live in.
Okay, so it covers a couple of the categories. Okay. The other thing that I just wanted to ask for clarification, you mentioned that seniors have a higher HHI. I just wondered, household income. Okay. Then I wanted to comment that one of the aspects that I was kind of surprised by, and I guess maybe I would hope maybe we could take a second look at it. I find it a little confusing that two of the taglines have the word creative in them. And I guess I thought it would be more powerful to have different words in them all, particularly because, Southampton and Port Elgin, at times the Saugeen Shores item will be part of the mix. And to have the word creative in the Saugeen Shores one and then also in the Southampton one, I think there's a missed opportunity there. And, I would encourage that there must be some other like inspired living or something that would work for Saugeen Shores, that would throw some different words into the mix, because I don't think it's fair to have the same word used twice, because I think that they would be stronger if they would work together and not just, if Saugeen Shores and Southampton were in the same document, the word creative would just be duplication. It would be stronger, I think, if there was some other message there. So I'll just leave you with that thought. The idea of a think tank is great. There's lots of other communities that have done that. They give them fancy names, and the best one that I can think of is down in Blythe. They had a group of inspired people get together that just came up with a plan that was over 5 or 6 years, and amazing things have happened in Blythe. There's a group now in Owen Sound that's getting together, so certainly we should be doing that here. I would say not just in Port Elgin, but in Southampton too, but there's lots of good ideas in the report, so thank you.
Further questions? I think we'll get Councillor Mike Myatt first, and then I'll come to Councillor Matheson.
Thank you. I just wondering, thank you for your presentation, and I just wondering, on my Saugeen Township hat for a second, but Saugeen Shores is made up of 3 wards, Port Elgin, Southampton, and Saugeen Township. And Saugeen Township, everything south of Port Elgin's fish and chip is in the township. A lot of business at the south end. And the connecting link between Port Elgin and Southampton, I dare say, which is Saugeen Township, will result in business filling that gap. And I do understand how Port Elgin, Southampton are the main features of this. I get that part. But as far as when we talk about these business to Bruce toolkits, was there consideration given, like in the future, where we're talking about not just the main streets, but we're talking about the waterfront development with business at south end of town and between the 2 towns, agricultural business. I know you're talking mainly commercial small business, but in your discussions with staff with your planning, was that whole aspect with Saugeen Township being our third ward in the town of Saugeen Shores talked about?
So when we were hired, I'm going to answer your question really quick, but in a little bit of a round way, but I get right to it. When we were first hired, I think back, it was 2014, one of the first things everybody wanted us to look at only were main streets. Let's fill up main streets. And we said, well, why would you do that? You've got areas in between main streets. You've got great business opportunities outside of main streets. And main streets are retail usually, unless they're full of dental offices. So you really want to have a thriving retail area which requires a population, which requires more economic vitality. So the short answer to your question is we see the whole area. We see the whole area, not just those downtown strips or those downtown parts of those 2 higher profile communities. We saw the whole area. And that's, we think if you take on that arts and culture in Southampton and more innovative, and I realize it wasn't a question, so I won't answer on the creativity, you're going to find both your markets and the third one and the whole area around will grow. If Bruce County does its job right and casts that wide net properly, all the markets will grow. So the answer is yes. We did.
Saugeen Township was talked about anyways. Okay. That's good. I just wanted to say, Mr. Acting Mayor, that I will be supporting this recommendation. I did have a question. Second question is that, will a staff report come back with a plan of attack in terms of how this plan will be implemented? We're not really. Oh. I didn't know he was going to ask that.
Why don't we turn that over to the Manager of Strategic Initiatives, and she can tell us about that.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Yeah, when we look at the implementation, so the toolkits that were presented, I'm asking Council to receive the toolkits, and then that gives us a bit of flexibility to work with EDAC, or Economic Development Advisory Committee. But then we also have a session coming up where we will be meeting back with the stakeholders that we initially met to move this forward, that Gary had talked about. We are inviting those business owners back to the room and other stakeholders such as the RTO7, certainly Bruce County, OMAFRA, agriculture representatives, tourism representatives for a session in June. And then at that session what we're going to do is have a look at the toolkits and start to prioritize from our economic development strategic plan, from our business to Bruce toolkits, and really start to dive into what our stakeholders feel is most important and, of course, implement as we can with the resources that we have.
I take it, Councillor Matheson, you questions in? So we'll go over to Councillor Grace, and then I'll get Councillor Menage.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. My first one is about the promotional materials that you had. I know there's samples. Will you be using real pictures of local scenes? Okay. One thing I noticed with the Southampton mock-up that you have is it's all visual art. So Southampton has a very diverse music, theater happening going on as well, and hopefully that your promotional materials will reflect the whole arts.
If you look inside the catalog, you'll see that those woodworking, artisan, craft, all those good things.
Okay, but I mean music and theater and also history and heritage is a strong part as well. I was really glad to see the recognition of having the spin-offs and recognition that it's important to have a diversified economy, that we can build on the strengths of what Bruce Power gives us to do that. One of the things I've always thought about that would be a big advantage that might be able to be related here, and I just wondered if you had thought about it, because I didn't see it in your list of suggested spin-offs, is a home health care industry. Because you've recognized that we do have a very significant senior population, health care, having adequate health care practitioners is a challenge for us. Is that something that you could comment on?
I think it's going to happen naturally. Like if you look at Port Elgin and you look at Southampton, both have think tanks of their own type that fit their brand. Those ideas will come out of those groups. So it's not just necessarily home health care or seniors care. It's more aimed at innovative ways to deliver those services. And I think those will come out of the groups. What I worry about from a positioning exercise, that if you position as, if you go too far that way, you'll become a seniors community. So our task was to my phrase, young up a bit. Because if I look at the average ages in this market, even with Bruce Power here, we're older than we should be. Southampton for sure. And we've got to attract people who are going to take over the businesses from a succession point of view. Right. So that's why we didn't include it, but I think it's going to happen naturally because the market's here.
Okay, one last question, please. One of the comments that you make is you refer to an attraction strategy which maintains Southampton's quaint and small town feel. I wondered if you had any recommendations or thoughts about integrating building and design guidelines or suggestions for zoning bylaw amendments which might enhance that part of the brand of Southampton.
I don't, but I think Spruce the Bruce does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Councillor Menage.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So I'm often in the linkage market here. So first of all, I'd like to congratulate the work and really thank you for presenting it as a change narrative, because I believe that it's sparkling and it's vibrant, and that's important. There were two or three things that I guess three things that have percolated from me to the top here, and one of them is that because I was intimately involved in it, was the waterfront master plan, where we said, one of those things that we could do, speaking of township parts as well, was to look at something like the Saugeen River did with its canoe entry points, and say that maybe we have 10 superlative beaches that you should come and visit. We have the best 10 beaches around, and we may have more beaches than any other community. Other communities profess that they have one or two nice beaches. We have multiples of them, and the Waterfront Master Plan speaks to those multiple beaches and beach opportunities. So there's one thought. Affordable housing, this must be the 5th time I've spoken on affordable housing in the last 6 to 12 months, I suppose, and I believe that it's gonna bite us if we don't deal with it soon, and I really like to see it come to the top as a priority for community discussion. Let's solve that one before we get too ambitious with drawing all of these people that you think will come. Build it, they will come. Well, let's look at this affordable housing problem. And the last one for me is it's interesting because I've spoken to many of the new GTAH residents that have relocated to SNC Lavalin's office, to Rolls-Royce office, and they've come here. And I wondered if your work predated them arriving, whether it would be good to go back and ask those people who have now relocated from the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area here, how do they fit in the equation? What are they now looking for? What is it that they left behind in the city that they would love to see us be creatively doing for them, so that they're the bow wave, they're the front runners. We hope there are more behind them, but what have they got to tell us?
Have a comment to that, the Manager of Strategic Initiatives?
Sure, thank you. Through you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, so we do have regular communication, certainly with some of the nuclear suppliers that you mentioned that have moved into the area, and it's fascinating to discuss with them their arrival and what it looks like from their perspective. And as a newcomer into our community, what do we have? What don't we have? What do you miss? And I really like, and that's a perfect example of mentioning SNC and Rolls-Royce, and they're bringing different ethnicities, and they're diversifying our community, which is fantastic, and they're finding that our community is exceptionally welcoming, and that's fantastic news too. When we talk about the think tank and this notion of bringing these, super smart people together and then that magic happens, some of that discussion has come up too. I know a conversation with another nuclear supplier, they said, we really want to build that network together. A lot of them do work together. They're not always competitors, and they're working together on lots of projects, but they do want to come together and they want to brainstorm and they want to do things and they want to talk to each other and they want to get to know the community. So the idea of the think tank, I think, will leverage some of what's happening, but I do appreciate your comment on, which came first here, and is there an opportunity to expand that. So thankfully, the relationships that we do have with them, we are continuing, I should say, those conversations with them and learning lots.
The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Through you. Jill, could you stand up? When you left, you said you were going to come back off, and I think this is only the second time you've been back, so
I
just
apologize.
Wanted to say that it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
It's
good to be back.
Thank you for paying attention to us and helping with all this.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for the presentation and for the report. I think there's a lot of good things in the report. It's important to sort of note that we're not starting from zero here. We've got a lot of things ongoing right now. We talk about affordable housing. We've just got this new community improvement plan project underway, which is intended to incentivize and enable affordable housing. We're doing a lot of things, and this adds some things to that list of things that we could do. I like the recommendation from the manager, because it enables us to look at the document and pick out those things that we can do most efficiently in the near term, and that will work best for us in the circumstances in which we find ourselves. Uniquely, potentially in our area and in southwestern Ontario, potentially, we don't have a really huge recruitment problem. One of the businesses you highlighted was the Southampton Olive Oil Company, a great business in Southampton, one that we did not recruit and did nothing to recruit. And if we had 1,000 committees on 1,000 typewriters for 1,000 years, we never would have dreamed of recruiting it. And so they just showed up, and they showed up because businesses show up when they see markets. And the most important thing for us to do is to have a market and to ensure that the restrictions that can find themselves in place that hold business back are lifted wherever possible. And one of those areas is labor, which goes to affordable housing. That's the thing you hear. That's the thing I hear most from anybody in the community when I talk to businesses. I can't employ anybody. That's the thing we need to solve, and we're working on it. And you've suggested it, and you're right to do so. So the key thing from my perspective is we need to let business be business, and let government be government. One of the things that you said that sent shivers down my spine a little bit was this comment of teaching people how to run businesses, right? This teaching arts businesses how to be businesses. I kind of, it was wrong. I think it was Ronald Reagan who said the 10 most scary words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help," right? And I think that governments don't teach business how to do business. Business is going to be way out ahead of us on that every day of the week, and it's going to keep being that way. So I think there's some great things in here. I think we're going to pick out those great things. We have good staff at Bruce County and in the town of Saugeen Shores who are going to do that work for us, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results of it. One question I have for the manager of strategic initiatives is with regard to the recommendation, and it's the second point about, or it's the first point, pardon me, about adopting these themes. We have a lot of reports where we have approved a number of themes for Port Elgin and Southampton, including two separate toolkits produced under Spruce to Bruce with two totally different themes for Southampton and Port Elgin. And that's not the only ones. I mean, we've got themes coming out our ears. So what are we going to settle on here? If we say today that, you can use these themes, if we approve them to be used as the implementation of this program, what happens to the old themes? Is there going to be some reconciliation? Because there was a lot of invested in some of that other work, right, from our business improvement areas and groups and committees across the municipality. So maybe that's not a question you can answer right now, but it's something we definitely need to figure out before we start rolling these out. What's it going to be? Do you have an answer to that?
Yep, absolutely. So thanks very much. And I did have that conversation recently with Bruce County, and I said, so we have a Spruce the Bruce theme, which, the boardwalk vibe for Port Elgin. I'll just use that as an example. And now we have, for Port Elgin, we're talking about energizing innovation. And so this, keeping in mind that this is a business to Bruce theme and the boardwalk vibe is a Spruce to Bruce theme. And I'm going to do the best I can at kind of describing the two of them. So Spruce to Bruce, yeah, certainly we have seen some infrastructure in place with that branding and that concept. And the Port Elgin Gateway sign is a good example of that. That concept is from that brand and that theme of the boardwalk vibe for Port Elgin. Things within that as well include garbage containers, light fixtures, different poles and bike stands, for example, in the downtown core of Port Elgin. So those toolkits identify some of that infrastructure and that concept and that design and that look and that feel of the physical place. The business to Bruce, when we talk about energizing innovation, we're talking about attracting the who and the entrepreneurs. So yes, there are tactics, and yes, some of the tactics are hard. They're not, I'd argue, they're not infrastructure. They're not something we're going to see downtown. We'll see it on the website. We'll see it in different roll-up banners or whichever pitch kits we might move forward. But that is the best that I can describe.
And the themes were designed to work together.
Correct, yes.
All of that work was known, so we knew that when we started, and why we were asked to do the umbrella theme, and the other work was to make sure it fit with everything else.
You have a question, Councilor Minaj?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. So it's Gary, right?
Yeah.
I thought I saw you flinch when the Vice Deputy Mayor made a very creative review of Saugeen Shores as living creatively, and Southampton is embracing your creativity. So if we're going to go to motion and we're going to approve this, and those are the three cast in stone, did you flinch? Are you interested?
I'm just a very nervous person.
Are you interested in an option on change there, or are we locking this in when we vote?
Well, I don't think that's for me to answer. I think your team has to.
I mean, obviously, if you support this recommendation, you're supporting those themes that are in the report, but that's not to say that these things can evolve, and I have the sense that this will evolve as time goes forward because we have a few things at play. So, I mean, am I expressing that adequately enough, Jessica?
Yes, thanks very much. And the notion to approve, if we can have these themes approved this evening, it will also allow Bruce County to move this forward and allow our presence on the businesstobruce.com website, which is an important part of this. So getting us moving on this in this direction will allow them to continue to move the project forward. And then we then can implement as the town of Saugeen Shores which pieces may fit for us.
One more from Councilor Minaj.
Thanks. So I thought I made a pitch to you suggesting that maybe there was a chance that these would not be the final. And then I'm just hearing now that if we approve this, this is going straight to Bruce County to be adopted and rolled out. So I'm asking once again then, can we put a pause in this if our professional consultants, our Bruce County friends, and our managers think, and the council thinks that we should put a pause on this for an option? If they come back, if everybody's coming back saying absolutely not, this is the way it should be, then I'm okay with that.
I think you have an accurate synopsis from the administration. If you would like to change or make amendments to the direction coming forward, we can do that. What I can do is read the recommendation, and we'll see what council does with it. How about I do that? Councillor Matheson.
Is not the motion tonight just to receive it so we can continue to work on it?
Let me read the recommendation. The recommendation is the council approves the Business to Bruce themes as presented by Bruce County and Tenzing for the communities of Port Elgin and Southampton and Saugeen Shores to be used through the implementation of the Business to Bruce program. That council receives the Port Elgin Business to Bruce Toolkit and the Southampton Business to Bruce Toolkit as presented by Bruce County and Tenzing. That's the recommendation. If there's no further comments, I'll ask the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, so that takes us on to item 2 under General Government, Staff Report, Appointment of Integrity Commissioner, and I suspect the clerk has the report.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. The report before you recommends an appointment of an Integrity Commissioner. The County of Bruce has completed the RFP process, and based on the evaluation criteria, the county has recommended and appointed Mr. Harold Elston. The RFP provides that Mr. Elston may offer his services to the lower tier municipalities on the same basis that he offers it to the County of Bruce. Mr. Elston is a lawyer practicing in the Collingwood area and is an Integrity Commissioner for a number of municipalities. Once appointed, Mr. Elston will provide training at least once per term of council to the council members regarding their roles and responsibilities under the council's code of conduct. He will also investigate any complaint that may be received regarding council members' conduct and the application of any policy and procedure with respect to the code of conduct. If a complaint is received, the commissioner will investigate and will follow his report with council. The term of the agreement is until December 2020, and there's a provision for automatic renewal. The financial impact is that there will be a $250 hourly rate for all services provided, plus a 50-cent per kilometer for travel time. And there is no annual retainer for his service.
Thank you. I'll read the recommendation and we'll take questions or comments. The recommendation is that Council pass a bylaw to appoint Harold G. Elston as Integrity Commissioner for the town of Saugeen Shores and enter into the attached service agreement. Questions or comments? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to clarify with the clerk. You just said about council, but this would also provide an opportunity related to members of a number of committees, correct?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, this applies to the council members and its local boards. That's what the code of conduct for council applies to. So a local board, and the definition is the business improvement areas.
And there's reference a number of times to the proper request, and that's has written into our code of conduct, right?
That is correct.
Thanks.
Questions or comments? Councillor Minaj.
Can you remind me then, sorry, Mr. Deputy Mayor, can the clerk please remind me then why we only acknowledge the existence of one local board in completing this kind of business? Why isn't the passing of other committees by this council and putting them in place and having membership and members of council on those committees, why isn't that included?
The answer to that is in the Municipal Act, so the definitions are applied or is provided through the Municipal Act.
Further questions or comments? Being none, you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? That's carried. That takes us on to item number 3, which is staff report with regard to physician recruitment update, and the Chief Administrative Officer has the report.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Tonight's report is both an update on the current status of the town's efforts related to physician recruitment and a request for council's support to begin lobbying with the Minister of Health. Council's foresight a few years ago resulted in the expansion of the Dr. Earl Medical Clinic. Currently, there is one pod still available, and recruitment efforts are well underway to fill that pod. The newest doctors in town are still taking new patients through the Healthcare Connect program, and residents without a family doctor should register via that program. Healthcare is a provincial responsibility, not a municipal one, but the town has invested heavily over the years to do our part to make sure residents receive quality care. Going forward, we will require even more doctors, and our request to the Minister via the Mayor is to open up additional spots beyond the current provincial maximum so that we can reasonably recruit more doctors.
Thank you. Well, we have a recommendation, and I'll read it. Then we'll take questions or comments. The recommendation is that the physician recruitment update report be received and that the Mayor be requested to send a letter to the Minister of Health requesting relief from the managed entry process, and that a copy of the letter be forwarded to Lisa Thompson, MPP. Questions or comments? Councillor Mike Meyer.
Thank you, Luke. And thank you for the report, Mr. CAO. And I've said before these meetings as a member of the physician recruitment team, I've said before, I'll say again, one orphan patient is one orphan patient too many. And I think what we're doing here with our letter to the Minister of Health is requesting relief. And I think what some people forget sometimes, particularly at the Ministry of Health, is that not too many years ago, we were at about 12,500 people. And latest census indicates we're over 14,000. When those doctor numbers were set, with the amount of doctors that were able to be funded through the province, our numbers, not only 14,000 today, but are scheduled to go to 17,500 according to our development charge numbers. So that number eventually has got to change when you take it, and I don't know what exactly the number of patients a family doctor would take. I'm assuming anywhere from 800 to maybe 1,400. I'm not sure the exact numbers, but if our numbers, and they have gone to over 14,000 and growing by another 3,000 people in the next 6, 7, 8, 9 years, we are growing. We have a need for additional doctors. So I think this recommendation is a very sound recommendation. I did want to say too, if I could, Mr. Acting Mayor, is that the building that we remind the community that the Dr. Earl Medical Clinic, we did a lot of good things in the last 5-10 years with opening up that new space, and there's an additional space at the back of the building that's set up, ready to go, close to ready to go, I believe, for an additional doctor. So it's just a matter of finding that person to fill that spot, and let's get that orphan patient list from 500 down to 0. And I think it can be accomplished. And I wanted to just tip of the hat to Peggy, our physician recruiter. She continues to work very hard around the province of Ontario, trying to find new recruits to come in and relocate to Saugeen Shores. And I personally believe, even though I'm not happy with the 500, I still believe we're doing okay. And find that one extra doctor and get that number down to 0 would be even better. I'm going to throw this number out for the purpose for the media here tonight, and it's Healthcare Connect. Again, those 500 orphan patients. If there are others, 1-866-532-3161 is Healthcare Connect. So if you don't have a doctor, you need one, you're not registered, that's the number to call. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Myatt. Councillor Minaj.
Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. And it's such a good news story fraught with so much continuing error and conflict and complete misunderstanding. I have no idea how this system works. I have a neighbor on my street. He can walk to the Dr. Earl Health Center in 7 minutes. He's been orphaned for 5 years, and he just got Healthcare Connect to connect him to a doctor in Owen Sound. He's a taxpayer. He's paying for the Dr. Earl Health Center through his taxes, and he can't walk there and see a doctor. He has to be in a car driving to Owen Sound. This system stinks. And as much as the good news story is there, it is so wrong. It is so wrong to expect people who live on the street that I live on that can see the Dr. Earl's Health Center from the bottom of their driveway, and they can't get a doctor there. I am sorry for raising my voice. I apologize.
No problem. I just ask you to watch the tables in the future. Further questions or comments? I think there's a line in here that the CAO has written in his report. As the community continues to step up and do our part, staff recommend requesting the province to work with us and do theirs. I think that's the appropriate line. I mean, you look at this long list of things that the town has done, and it's a long list, an expensive list, in a sector that we don't have any direct responsibility. We're doing a fair bit here, and we need the province to step up and make sure that the people in our community, ones that the councillor has rightly identified, have doctors. And that's their primary responsibility, and they need to do it. And it's important for us to speak on their behalf and stand up for this vital local service. So yeah, obviously support the recommendation, and I think if there's no further questions or comments, I can call the question. All in favor? Carried. All right. That moves us then on to 5.3, Environmental Services and Transportation. And the first report is a staff report on the 2018 Capital Sidewalk Replacement Program, and we have a report from the Director of Infrastructure and Development Services.
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor. The Capital Sidewalk Program last year was not carried out because when we were asking contractors if they were willing to bid and price, they weren't willing to do the work last fall. There was too much work on the books already. So this year we've combined last year's $25,000 and this year's $25,000 to complete this year's sidewalks and last year's. That would be the section of Bricker Street from Christopher to Davie and Mill Creek Road from Hoover Court to Tatey Drive in Port Elgin. When we brought the tenders back, they were over budget by $8,000. But in the meantime, we've been going through with Treasury to try to finalize the books for 2017 and found that there was a carryover from 2016 gas tax that had not been incorporated in the 2017 budget. So we were fortunate enough to find $46,962 of unspent money that I would like to use $8,000 of that for this capital sidewalk program.
Then we'll take questions or comments. The recommendation is that Blue Water Lawn Care and Landscaping Limited be awarded the contract for the 2018 Capital Sidewalk Replacement Program, tender number 2018-6320-5160, in the amount of $57,020.30 plus applicable HST, and that the additional funds necessary to complete this project be taken from the 2016 gas tax surplus, and that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to sign the necessary tender documents. Questions or comments? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the Director of Public Works, still for about another half an hour maybe. When you talk about the 2017 Annual Sidewalk Inspection Report, is that a document that is easily transferred digitally to all of us? I've asked a number of times to have access to the sidewalk assessment reports, and I'm just curious, is it in a format that we can receive a copy of it to see just where the weak links are in the community?
Deputy Mayor, it's an Excel spreadsheet, so the Public Works crew walk them and they record locations of deficiencies, so lips of a certain size, cracks, or where the surface coming off. So it's just a long list in Excel spreadsheet. It's generated every year.
Okay. So if we were to come in, we could look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. I also wanted to ask, this is, it's the capital sidewalk program, so it's for the replacement of sidewalks. We do repair work on an annual basis too, which is funded through the operating budget, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and the intention is that a lot of that work happens by our own staff?
That's correct, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions or comments? Any? So ask the question. All in favor? Carried. That takes us on to report number 2, staff report 2018 Port Elgin interlocking brick repairs, and the Director of Infrastructure and Development Services has a report.
Thank you, and through you, Deputy Mayor. So the downtown brick is a continuation of the work that was done last year. The intention of the program is to make the downtown attractive and walkable per the strategic plan. The repairs in these blocks are required to remove some trip hazards and to maintain safety on the sidewalk. Again, we wish to spend the additional funds from the gas tax. This project last year was substantially lower in the unit price. The company that did it last year has come back with higher prices, unit prices, to do the work this year. Their work was very high quality, and we would like to recommend that we go with this contractor again. We will be again using I guess about $23,000 out of the gas tax budget for this project. This one's a little different than the capital project, where we want to cover the overage, but we also want to complete an additional section. So we knew the budget was not going to be able to fit into what we do with the $40,000 every year. So we had omitted the west side of Goderich Street in one block, and now that we have the gas tax surplus showing, we would like to include it and get those 2 blocks done. That would make all of the brick repair from Market to Gustavus complete, and then we could continue on working south of Gustavus in the future.
Thank you. Have the recommendation, then we'll take questions or comments. It's recommended that Michael Scott's Landscaping Limited be awarded the contract for the Port Elgin interlocking brick repairs, tender number 2018-63205680, in the amount of $48,694.80 plus applicable HST, as well as the additional work to complete the west side of Elgin Street to Market Street in the amount of $8,008 plus applicable HST, and that the additional funds necessary to complete this project be taken from the 2016 gas tax surplus, and that the Mayor and Clerk be authorized to sign the necessary tender documents. Questions, comments? Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and through you to the Director. Just a question about this found money in the gas tax, so to speak. Before we go spending it all on sidewalks and interlocking bricks to make the place beautiful, we have a significant project out on the River Road that where it got washed out through this flood. So are we saving any of that money aside for the rehabilitation of that section of road that essentially no longer exists?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the River Road project for the washout, some of it is coming from the operations budget with the soft top, but most of it is coming from the road reserve, because that's what the road reserve was saved for. That was our expectation for that money. We were also looking at using some of the gravel that is existing at the Lamont pit that the town now owns to do that work, and that would be a savings as well.
Further comments? The Vice Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a question about communication with the affected properties. I happen to be in 2 of the locations that would be affected by this, and I asked them if they'd heard if anything was happening, and they said no. So I'm curious, how will we provide information to the property owners on both sides of the street in this section as to the anticipated work and how long and that kind of thing, because it will be disruptive?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, just like every other reconstruction project, we will hand deliver notices to each of the business owners along the section. We'll also send a letter to the BIA for their information. We circulate other stakeholders like GTEL and Bruce Telecom, anybody that has infrastructure in that area as well. We do it after the council has approved it, and at least 2 to 3 weeks before the construction will start.
Further comments? I take it then that there's no significant design changes contemplated as part of this work, that what's coming up is basically what's going to go back down. Is that correct?
That's correct. We would remove bricks that are broken.
Yeah.
We have a stockpile at the concession 6 yard to replace them, but it's just coming down and going back as it was.
Okay, very good. I think it's good to keep this project on track by doing this, to keep it on that 4-year time frame that you have laid out so we can complete it, because that sidewalk is deteriorating rapidly, and this work needs to be completed as soon as possible. So from my perspective, good we're proceeding. Councillor Minaj.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Well, I didn't really have a question, but I think the work is valuable and important, and it's a safety issue, and I'm pleased that we're continuing with the program. What I did mention to the director in the past was, when we did our walkabout, was why were the bricks crumbling, and we envisioned that a heavy dose of salt might be the culprit there. So that was one consideration, and the fact that the bricks were depressed somewhat. Wondered if the weight of the equipment that we're using to clear the sidewalks. On the other hand, it could just be that after 40 years or so, it's something that you would plan for as asset management goes. You would say, we'll probably have to come back, we'll monitor it, we'll probably have to come back in 30 or 40 years again and do the same program again. Is that something along the lines of what you're thinking?
It would depend in 40 years if the intent or the desire of the town is to maintain the interlocking brick, or if they're looking to go to something different, honestly. Minimum maintenance standards are changing when it comes to sidewalks, and we're responsible for a wider swath now. So through the years, there may be decisions made where they don't want to continue replacing the bricks. The quality of the bricks is actually quite random. The bricks that came out of Coulter Parquet, we have a lot of them now that we can replace any ones that were in weak condition. And as they did the work last year, we found less in bad condition than we thought we were going to find.
Thank you very much. If there's nothing further, then you've heard the recommendation. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Pardon me. So that takes us on to reports of department heads, and there's 3 reports there, and the first one is a report on the health and safety update report, and we have the health and safety coordinator here, Candy Blackburn. I don't know, Candy, do you have comments that you'd like to make to the report since you're here?
I don't have any comments, but
Great, thank you. So are there questions? I guess, well, we'll start there. Are there questions of the health and safety report? Councillor Mike Myatt.
Thank you, Luke. And I just first I wanted to commend you, Cass, for your report. And I remember when this position was created a few years back, and it was a right decision back then. It's a right decision today, and appreciate the good work you do. One of the nice things I see in the quarterly nominations, my co-workers in the following areas, you listed the areas here. When is that program now been rolled out, or is it just being developed, or where are we at with the quarterly nomination by co-workers? Is that already happened, Candace? Is that
for the employee recognition program? So we have put that in place. We our first nomination back.
A nice part of it to recognize. And I just wondering the recent external audit results, 91% overall. Do we have any? And I see there's 100% in 8 of the 19 sections, which is nice. Compared to other municipalities around the province, is 91% to me seems reasonable. I'm sure you're shooting for a higher number, or we are, I should say. But is 91%, in comparison to other municipalities, how are we doing? Okay. It seems to be a reasonable number, but I guess we're always trying to attain a higher number. So, anyways, thanks for your good work.
Thank you. Are there further questions? The Vice Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Grace.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, there's a reference to a company or a service called Compliance Sync. Is that something that you have a great deal of involvement with, or is it a different department that I should direct a question to about it?
Compliance Sync is a external contract company. Currently do approved contractor. It's just very time consuming, so we've wanted to go the way of.
So how long have they been involved with Saugeen Shores?
We're just starting with them.
Okay, that's why I'd never seen their name before, so that's good to know. I also noted the reference to 8 of 19 sections. Just has a comment. The sections that we didn't get the 100% on. How does the town work towards improvement? I know there's a committee, but do you have a comment about just going forward how you're going to work towards improving?
Yeah, we currently have an action created from this audit and recommendations.
Councillor Grace.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Candy, I just had one question on just a definition. If you could explain what report only is.
Yeah, report only would be an incident where
Okay, thank you.
I think it's important to be clear, and thanks for your comments, Candy, that this report encompasses the entire municipal operation, including our police services and some things that are external in many ways to the municipal operation centrally. So, and lines of work that are very different from what a lot of our staff is doing. So, when you factor all of that in, I think these numbers are very strong because the operation what's under the control of the municipal administration their numbers are extremely good. So I want to congratulate all the staff, and particularly you, Candy, for your work on this, and thank you for the report. There are two other reports there, the Spring Cleaning Week and the Refreshment Vehicles Report. I guess, are there any comments or questions from any members? Councillor Grace, then we'll get Councillor Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My question was about I know last year, I believe, we had some complaints about the food truck down at the beach. And I'm assuming this year we have measures in place to address, prevent similar issues from arising.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. If we're talking about the same complaints, it was with respect to noise from a generator, and hydro service will be provided this year.
Dave Mayette.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and through you, my question is with regards to the Earth Week, I guess, which is now Spring Cleanup Week called here, and I think it's a great idea, and I'm fully supportive of it, and I've many times walked ditches picking up garbage. And I hope to do it again this year, and get a group of friends, family, and whoever else I can coerce into joining me. But it says in the report that the wording is that areas will be assigned on a first-come, first-served basis or something like that. I would have thought that if a group, like for instance where I live, I noticed just this past couple of weeks as the snow was receding in the ditches, or at least it was receding, there's along the side road 1314, which is adjacent to where I live, there's lots of beer cans and pop bottles and Tim Hortons cups and so on and so forth, and I would like to think that we could adopt an area that is closest to home as opposed to being assigned a road randomly. Am I reading this wrong? Anybody know? I know Jane's not here.
Over to the clerk.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. We do have to have some organization to the pickup. It may work in the rural areas that you could pick up closest to your home, but in the urban areas, we certainly want the groups to register with the municipality so that we can organize the different areas. But we encourage you, if you see garbage, go ahead and pick it up.
I do all the time anyway.
First, we'll go to the Vice Deputy Mayor.
I was just going to say that a couple years ago, 3 groups showed up at different times to do the cleanup around Fairy Lake. My group, the Chambettes, was the 3rd group, so we had a lovely walk. It had all been cleaned up. So I think the idea is to spread everybody out in some of the higher profile areas. So I don't think it's to exclude what you're talking about. It's really just to make sure that people who want to do it have a chance to do it.
Yeah, it's important to be clear, and the CAO points it out that nobody's assigned a location. They're offered locations to work on. So that's according to the report anyway, so it's fairly flexible. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Through you. Is there any way we can get the construction companies that are doing the building to actually clean up in and around their areas? I know in the development in my area, the wind has carried a lot of their debris down through the ditches. There's all kinds of material, or is that left up to us to do?
I think that's a property standards issue, but I think certainly that may go beyond what we're talking about here right now, I guess. But it's something that we could certainly discuss with the administration. I encourage you to raise it with perhaps bylaw enforcement, the building department. But I think it's this is a particularly great undertaking, and there's a lot of great community organizations that we have and individuals and volunteers across the community that do this. And so I think ahead of this taking place in a couple of weeks, I think we should just express on behalf of Council our thanks to all those groups for taking the time out of their lives to keep our community clean. So with that, if there's nothing further, then we'll take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Matheson, seconded by Councillor Rich. All in favor? We'll reconvene at 5 to the hour.